the same concept of fitness applies. Like the relationship doesn't automatically remain awesome forever. Like you got to work on it, and if you're abusive and you operate outside the parameters, you're going to cause damage to the relationship. Entrepreneurship, same fitness idea applies again. If you're not disciplined and you're not on top of your business, like that's going to start to fall apart. You got to do the work. You got to show up. You have to do the reps. So that fitness metaphor runs through really, really perfectly.
I saw on your webpage here, innovation isn't for people with big budgets, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that we all have the ability to be innovative, come up with new projects, become an entrepreneur. And oftentimes I feel like we look for excuses to not be that person or not to do those things. And budgets is one of them, right? Like, oh, I don't have the money, I can't do that. Do you speak on that for a minute? Because it's a wonderful point, and it's not just budgets. It's other things that we put our own barriers in place. How do we encourage people to get past those barriers and not think about those barriers first?
Yeah. So I do consulting work, and I've been exposed to innovation in science, in business, with nonprofits, and all the way down to what are called smallholder farmers. These are farmers with I think less than an acre. So we did some international development work around Latin America and Africa for smallholder farmers. And yeah, right down to some of the poorest people on earth, they need to be thinking creatively in an innovative way in order to be successful and operate. So across the whole spectrum. I know for entrepreneurship, for myself as an entrepreneur, there's this choice, right? You come out of college, you don't have kids yet, you have this opportunity to try to be an entrepreneur, and you're broke and you have student loans and you're not, but you have no experience, but you either say yes or you don't. And if you say yes, you go down the journey of being an entrepreneur and you begin to pay your dues. The first thing you do, any career, any path you choose in life, is you pay your dues. So if you were to go the corporate route, guess what? That first year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you're going to be paying your dues. So if you go the entrepreneur route, you're paying your dues as well. The form of paying your dues changes. In the corporate setting, it's you're working harder. You're a freshman at work. You're not getting paid a whole lot. You're not even really saving up any money until you get that promotion or until you move to a better company. You take that experience with you, et cetera. If you go the entrepreneurial route, you're paying your dues in the form of your first project's going to fail. Your second project's going to fail. Your third project's probably going to fail. And in all those failures, you learn, you develop a set of skills. And what's wonderful about entrepreneurship is anything is possible. The realm of possibilities, if you choose to be an entrepreneur, are expansive. Not necessarily true going the corporate route, getting a job and climbing the corporate ladder. So saying yes to entrepreneurship, they're really cool. If you wait, and so now you're 35 and you have 3 kids and you got a small budget, well, now it's a different challenge. Now you got to give up that steady paycheck. You might be putting your family at risk, but you have a budget and you have a set of skills and you have experience and a network. So still hard to say yes, but if you say yes, again, that expansive realm of possibilities that's only open to entrepreneurs, it's this unique sort of endeavor you can take, becomes open again.
Yeah. And I love the point that you're making about paying your dues, because the reality is anything is possible. My line is what you believe is what you'll achieve. And most people don't associate that with the dues. We're so inundated with social media and what appears to be successful people. Nobody sees the dues paid behind that, So in one person's celebration of finally making it and paying all those dues, everybody else is going, wow, they got that fast. I like to use Tito's Vodka as an example, or Kettle One Vodka, where I worked. When we were really made it big as Kettle One Vodka, people thought, wow, these guys came out of nowhere. Well, the company started in 1691. They paid over 300 years worth of dues. Finally got to the United States, put 10 more years of hard work in, and then they succeeded. Tito's Vodka, the same. They were in the market for 15 years before they succeeded. It's all about those dues and those learnings that you talked about, right? You fail and you learn. Can you push on that a little bit more? I'm sure you talk about it in your consulting, but it's a reality.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm, absolutely. So I think learning is always essential. It's a sort of constant thing in life. We're always learning. And once you stop learning, you do get stale. This is one of the advantages that entrepreneurs have over really large organizations.
Yeah.
There is a cost to being a large organization. There are many costs. One is a communication cost. So the internal communication that's required in a large company is high. In a larger company is higher. In a behemoth-sized company is massive. And so those communication costs restrict the organization from being able to be nimble. So as an entrepreneur, you have that advantage over the large organization. You can be nimble. You can move much faster. Your internal communication cost is zero as a solo entrepreneur. As a small team, it's very, very low. So you have that sort of advantage. So you can learn in a really nimble way. In innovation in general, if we zoom out from entrepreneurship and we look at innovation in general, you're entering the unknown. You're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, or something you've never done before. It doesn't have to be globally new. It could be new just to you. So you're innovating. And in order to do something you haven't done before, you have to try things you haven't tried before. And in trying new things, you have to be ready to learn. Those learnings then go back into your model. You go back to your drawing board, you adjust, and you try again. And so you make this slow progress forward, each learning compounding your ability to pursue building a business model or whatever else it is. So there's a couple things to highlight here. Entrepreneurs and scientists, really good entrepreneurs and scientists do this really well. They begin with curiosity, and they're not they don't have an achiever mindset. They're not trying to get to the goal at all costs. They just want to know how the thing works. So a real scientist doesn't care what the outcome of the experiment is. He just wants to know how nature works. Same thing for really good entrepreneurs. They don't care if this idea works or the next one or a slight iteration. They just want to understand what the marketplace needs and how best to serve it. You have a real servant mindset. And curiosity is the through line. So one way to learn is to be curious, to do an experiment, to observe, and to learn from your experiment. The other ways of learning we're more familiar with: research, learn from what other people have done, getting expert advice, classroom-style learning, read a book. Those are all forms of learning in which we're sort of secondhand. Primary learning is discovery. All learning boils down to primary learning. Your secondary learning, reading a book, comes from somebody's primary learning somewhere down the line. So all learning boils down to discovery. And I think learning how to do discovery is a really unique skill. And whether you use it as a scientist, an engineer, an entrepreneur, an artist, there's a lot of rewards to reap from that style of learning.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that you broke that out into two categories. I'm one of those real life learners, right? I don't mind reading. I do enjoy reading, but I'd rather just make the mistakes, learn from them, and get after the project. I live on a ranch up here in Montana now. I didn't know the first thing about raising horses and cattle, and I have both. I'm learning a new lesson every day.
Whoa.
But what's amazing, though, as I go through this process, the tools that are used to take care of animals or fence them in or how you feed, you come across these really innovative products, and you're like, wow, that was smart, whoever thought of this. And if you really look at it, especially as you're learning something new, you realize somebody solved a problem that they were having, right? And then next thing you know, it evolved, and then you can go buy it at the local Murdoch's, horse and tack, store, because somebody solved their own problem. And I think that that's what's so fascinating about life in general. We can go around solving problems and coming up with solutions, and having the confidence to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we talk about anything is possible. And if it hasn't sunk in yet, really sunk in, you could think back to the Wright Brothers, and that just they're bicycle shop owners. Bicycle shop owners. These men just tinkered with bikes. Chains, gears, wheels, steering. That's it. That was their knowledge base. They weren't scientists. In fact, the scientists at the time said flying wasn't possible because the weight of the size of the wing has to increase exponentially, has to increase at the square of the weight of the object it's trying to carry, something like that. Basically, they're saying, bugs and birds can fly, but humans are too heavy.
Uh-huh.
If we ever invent flying machines, they'll be really small, like watches. It's like, no, that's wrong. That's not true at all. In fact, we fly the largest objects on the planet, And so the Wright brothers, they may have even been held back if they had official credentials. But that tinkering level, solve one problem at a time, play with it, enjoy it, love it, and never give up. They went to Kitty Hawk one year. This is a fun story about the Wright Brothers, if you don't mind the tangent.
Let's hear it.
So right around 1901, this is before they achieved powered flight. They had a glider. They were still learning to steer. They started with the steering challenge. And so they're like, okay, we'll go into the wind, which will give us a little extra lift, and we'll learn how to steer going downhill into the wind. And if we can learn how to steer, then we'll worry about adding power. Cool. So they build a glider. They go down to Kitty Hawk, which is like 3 trains, several days. They packed their whole life. They built a shed on the beach they would live in. They battled clouds of mosquitoes. This was not an enjoyable ride. Wow. There were no direct flights at the time. So they go down there and they do their first few tests, and they realize the data they were relying on was wrong. There's this German flight enthusiast. He had some data around wing shapes and the amount of lift you get from different shapes. He'd written it down, published, etc. They look at this. They built the glider based on that dude's data. Turns out he's wrong. They're not getting anywhere near the lift they wanted. So instead of quitting and leaving the dream of flight to someone else, they just got curious. They're like, well, if those wing shapes don't work, I wonder which ones do. And they built a wind tunnel. They tested hundreds of different wing shapes at thousands of different angles of attack. And so modern aviation relies on both of these things, the wind tunnel and different wing shapes. And this testing program, they discovered curves that worked really well. They went back to Kitty Hawk 2 years later, and they achieved powered flight. It's incredible what's possible with they started out tinkering with bicycles, and they invented flight. And so if you're sitting down as an entrepreneur and you think there are limits to what I could do, there are no limits to what you can do.
Yeah, one thing that I love that you said is if they had the proper credentials, they might not have ever invented flight.
Yeah.
Because sometimes credentials get in the way of success, and also I think as humans we feel like, well, I could never do that, right? Because I don't have a degree or this experience or work for this person. That is just, it's so untrue, and I'm going to wrap up a little bit. I want to hear about your company and what you guys are working on specifically and how you can be of value to others. But before I do that, I want to encourage people to reach beyond their own limitations, right? As you said, anything is possible. Don't be stuck in a groove because somebody put you there, right? So, Costa, talk about Innovation Bound and what you guys do and how you can be a resource to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation Bound is a consulting company, and so we work primarily with businesses. I also work with an organization called No Innovation, KNOW Innovation.
Okay.
Works better written down. And so that's the work we do with scientists. That's over at No Innovation. So we work with businesses and scientists on using their creativity to solve problems. And the easiest way to understand it is using creativity to solve problems. So in businesses, typically we're building training programs, and we are training people. So if you're training sort of frontline staff, they're learning creative problem-solving skills. If you're training managers or directors, they're learning to create an environment that's conducive to creative thinking. Right? They're trying to support by managing or directing in a certain way. If you're working with executives, they're managing an innovation portfolio. There's a whole other set of skills. So depending on where in the hierarchy, you're training different skills. But the point is to help organizations be more innovative. Somewhere along the way, it hit me that innovation isn't just for people with big budgets and shiny laboratories, that it's for all of us. And so my mission now is to get innovation, world-class innovation training that we deliver typically, with $5,000 a day consultants and so forth, to turn that into material that we can share with anyone for the price of an online course. So the course is called Innovation 101. It's up for early birds. So if you want to buy it now, it's on discount. Come on in, $35, super cheap. And you get a whole lot of one-on-one time with me because it's still a very small group of students. The ambition here is to reach 1 million people. So if you come in now and help shape the course, learn from the material and so forth, the course that results will be standalone eventually, and the standalone course will go out and scale up. And the idea is to make these skills accessible around the world.
I love it. And I love that you're not a small thinker. When I saw that million number on there, I thought, well, that's wonderful. Why shouldn't it be 1 million, right? And, the thing about this type of course you're suggesting is so great for people because, like I said, we get in our own way. And, a $35 course, which seems unbelievable, to get some great learnings and understanding, are really a continuation of this conversation. you can make a difference. And I wrote a little note here next year, anything is possible. And that was be bold.